Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran and I love playing my rogue. Don't get me wrong, it is my favorite class. I am Outlaw until it is literally out of the game. But I'll be honest, I'm someone who loves playing alts. I think a lot of you guys are like that. You want to have someone fresh, someone new to play. Maybe you have a class or a spec that's currently busted. So there you are playing an alt that's maybe really easy to play. Or something about the playstyle that hooks you. Maybe it's the class fantasy, maybe it's just the abilities, the rotation, or maybe the class simply puts out a stupid amounts of damage. Whatever it may be, I'm someone who loves playing alts. I love exploring what other classes do and how they play. First of all, for a rogue, it's really good because then I know what those classes do when I meet them in battlegrounds or arenas. But primarily it comes from simply me having a curiosity about how each class and each spec is played. How does the other side of the grass feel? With the patch 8.2, it's been a lot harder to get your alts up and running. There's awesome new catch-up mechanisms, but then you have the essence system and then grinding all those trinkets and gear in dungeons and raids. It takes a little bit of time to get things going. But I've been spending a lot of time on my alts over the last 2 weeks in order to be able to make this video to give you guys my thoughts on my 5 top favorite classes that I like to play whenever I'm not playing my rogue. Each and every single one of these classes is going to come with a specific spec that I'm going to be kind of mainlining. Now, the other specs of these classes are still good. I either enjoy them to some sort of an extent or I don't find them offensive. So I'll be putting all the specs and classes that I like in this video. We're going to start off with the obvious one. Let's get this one out of the way. The Fire Mage. I've talked about fire mages before in previous videos, and yes, they are one of the more popular specs right now in patch 8.2. Patch 8.2 should literally be renamed When the Fire Nation Attack, because there's literally fire mages everywhere. Fire is a top tier spec right now, whether you're doing dungeons, BGs, arenas, whether you're playing the game casually or are going super hardcore. Right now fire is actually the best spec for any type of content. The spec currently is very all around best in terms of the damage output, whether it is the burst damage, sustain, sorta kinda, none of the mages are really sustain heavy, but also a great execute. I would even dare to say the spec is fairly easy. There is some difficulty in terms of timing when you fire blast, especially if you're playing the Blaster Master trait that gives you mastery and you're trying to min-max the duration of that mastery during your burst opener, but with a little bit of practice just about anybody can do it. Mages in its own are great. Frost is pretty good, Arcane has a play style to it, but Fire is kind of the leading of the pack. I have to include mages in this because they've been super fun and I've always wanted to play a viable Fire Mage, and only now did I learn to really play around the current playstyle, and I've been having a lot of fun. Now let's move on to some of the least talked specs. I'm gonna have to go with Hunters. Hunters are always gonna make a great alt, but for me, I have to go with the Survival Hunter. The game changer for survival, and I think a lot of people will agree if you give the spec a try, is played with Lucid. Lucid is one of those essences that a lot of specs found very useful, and for a class like Survival Hunter who's always focus starved, Lucid ends up helping you a lot. The Onius ability fuels you full of focus, letting you spam out your strongest ability, Mongoose Bite, and trying to reach that 5 stack super quickly, which lets you the most amount of damage in your burst rotation. But also, the passive has a chance on uses of focus-based abilities to refund focus, making the spec feel a lot more whole. Also, your mastery as a stat is no longer truly garbage, so it's actually quite beneficial to use it within specific playstyles, which overall, mastery being a good stat for you does improve your overall damage output. Survival has a very fun, mobile, heavy, set focus playstyle. You are a hunter, and one of the advantages of playing a hunter is not only being able to hit enemies from range, which survival can do whenever you use the cooldown of aspect of the eagle, but mobility and being able to do things on the run. Survival can easily do that. You can engage with an enemy but also disengage, so even though you are a melee, it doesn't really feel like you are condensed to melee destroying mechanics. You also have a great support with a pet. You'll be surprised just how much utility your pet can bring in a dungeon group, especially if you're someone who just doesn't want to just DPS the boss and do the most amount of damage, but you'd rather support your allies in small ways, whether it is inside of a dungeon or PvP. Some of the damage output for survival that I really like is when dealing with multiple enemies, let's say like 2 or 3 at a time. Whenever you're not popping your cooldowns, there's a lot of target swapping. It's almost like you have a playstyle of like an Affliction Warlock, just making sure everybody is dotted. But you also have the big playstyle where you decide to take on a big group, find the guy with the biggest health and just nuke them down and cleave everybody around you. So I like that you have those massive switches from playstyle to playstyle. 1 minute, you're just micromanaging debuffs on enemies, making sure that everybody has a bleed and a dot and every other debuff, and the other, you're just unloading bursts on a single target, blasting bombs in their face, and everybody around them just eating the shrapnel. I feel that survival definitely saw a lot of improvements in patch 8.2, and I think a lot of you guys should give it a go, especially if you like PvP. But even outside of that, Beast Mastery and Marksman are also a very solid choice, so if you want to play a Hunter, I think they are awesome. Next class on this list with the spec of choice is going to be Affliction Warlock. Right now, Affliction Warlock, to me personally, is my ultimate favorite dot playstyle. What I like about Affliction is the change to the playstyle and the theory compared to all the other classes and specs I've played so far. For most classes, it really comes down to a feeling of you're spamming out damage. You're trying to spam out abilities to get the big numbers the whole time. You're trying to blast the boss's damage and it feels so visceral. But Affliction takes a step back a little bit, and instead of feeling like you are drilling damage into a boss, instead it feels like you are managing debuffs on a boss. Making sure that your agony doesn't run out, making sure that it builds up to their stacks, making sure corruption and maybe siphon life are on the boss at all times, making sure to refresh them right before they fall off. Managing haunt the whole time on an enemy, managing your unstable afflictions whenever you have them, and whenever you're not managing your dots, you're just funneling shadow bolts into the boss's face. It really comes down to a very refreshing playstyle. Because I wanted the class to play very similar to it, there's just so many classes in the game right now that are all about getting some sort of big burst, big damage into an enemy, rather than kind of slow and steady pace where the turtle still does win the race. What I also like about Warlocks in general is that they are fairly tanky. They can take a hit compared to my Mage. My Mage takes a hit, you just gotta blink, you gotta ice block, you gotta pop a shield and hope that the healer has you. But as a Warlock, as long as you're not dying to dumb mechanics, eating certain attacks to the face lets you still survive through it, which is exceptionally good if you wanna survive melee in PvP. And even though Affliction Warlock is, you know, the slow, deliberate killer of an enemy with all your dots from afar, you still do have more bursty playstyles with your gear. And you know me, I always like being able to customize my character depending on the pieces that I have and being able to kind of shift gears in playstyle. So even a spec like an Affliction Warlock, which is all about damage over time, can pack quite a punch. Next class on this list is gonna be Enhancement Shaman. And I've made videos on Enhance before, mostly where I'm disappointed in Shamans, primarily enhancement of just how bad they are. One of the things I said for patch 8.2 is I'm hoping that it helps certain specs become better. The Essence system needs to be a good system to fill in the gaps. And I would say that the Essence system has done more than I've expected because it made Enhancement Shamans a lot more fun for me. First of all, let's get it out straight. I love the fast-paced playstyle of this melee class where you're always spamming abilities, there's always something to do, and it keeps you engaged. I would even say Enhancement Shaman puts out a bit more damage than it ever has in previous patches, which to me, of course, it's more of a reason to want to pick it up because it's not quite dead in the water of a spec. For Enhancement Shamans, one of the things that I like is the customizability in their talents. Technically, there's no bad talents. Some are situational, but most of the talents you can make builds with them. Do you want to be a shaman that summons 4 totems like you did back in vanilla? You could do it for the flavor playstyle, and there's even talents and traits to function with it. Do you want to be more of a maintaining a bunch of buffs, maintaining a frost buff, fire buff, earth buff? Yes, there's a playstyle for that as well. Or even if you just want to spam buttons and mostly all about Storm Strike, you could even make a build with that. The customizability and the modularity of the spec is something I will always enjoy. You also have some great burst output right now. especially with the essences making some bursts a little bit easier, but the burst damage that Enhancement Shaman can put out, especially if you get super lucky with RNG, is nuts. I mean, to the point where you're probably just gonna have to replace whatever the key binding you have for Storm Strike, because you're gonna be spamming that ability a lot. Finally, I cannot overstate how much gaps the essence system fills. Enhancement Shaman has always been a spec that's not really amazing in single target fights, it's not really amazing in cleave or AoE fights, and the essence system really helps you with it. Whether through other stats like building up haste and building up crit, which you can use to do damage with your abilities, but also the actual effects helping you to fill in the gaps so you can change up your talents slightly differently. Like going for a full single target playstyle and using the meme beam in order to run yourself fairly decent damage in dungeons, yes please, or even going for a more AoE centric playstyle for talents while going for more single target essence. Gives you a lot of flexibility. That's what I really like about Shamans. Very happy with what Blizzard has done with the essence system. If you have the patience to get the essences for your Shaman as an alt, I think you should definitely give Enhancement another go. Finally, we have Displaced Priest, and this priest have been one of the best healers as of patch 8.2. That's great, but that is not why this spec is on this list. Basically, I hate myself, and I hate myself so much I want to play Displaced Priest. Displaced Priest, I swear to God, have to do double the effort to get the value that other healers have. Most healers just have to pop a cast on an ally that's very low on health, maybe maintain a healing over time or some sort of a buff on them. With Displaced Priest, you gotta maintain buffs, you gotta heal your allies, but also deal damage in order to heal your allies, and it's just kind of all over the place. I've been a huge fan of the Displaced Priest playstyle, primarily for the fact that it's very challenging. In fact, I would say it's probably still one of the hardest healers for most people to pick up, even though a lot of people in BFA like to say, oh, every spec is super easy. Give a Displaced Priest a try as a healer in a Mythic Plus dungeon on a bursting week and you'll know exactly what I mean. They have great damage output, and that's what I really like about Disc. You could build yourself in multiple different ways with gear, and you can gear yourself for a more healer heavy support, primarily in raids, or more damage based output where you're actually competing on damage with the rest of the DPS in a Mythic Plus dungeon. But yes, I mentioned earlier, the Disc Priests are one of the top tier healers currently. Actually, besides Holy Paladins and Disc Priests, those two are the only top tier best healers right now that you'll see in any Mythic raid environment. And I know a lot of you guys like to play meta, the best of the best specs, so if you want to be one of the best healers, Displaced Priest is something worth learning. But even if you're not striving to be the best of the best top tier healer, I still think a lot of people would love this damage slash healer oriented unique playstyle. I actually like that type of playstyle for healers so much. I'm leveling a paladin right now, and I want to give that melee holy paladin a real solid go. Anyway guys, that's going to be my list for top 5 favorite classes to play as alts besides my rogue. Now I don't have all the classes on the roster just yet. There's a couple classes that I'm missing here and there, but every time I level them, like warrior for example, or demon hunter, I just don't get the same rush as I do with the classes on this list. I've been spending a lot of time on these classes, trying to get them all the different essences, trying to get them the best benthic gear with full of sockets. So I'm actually going and trying to make these specs completely, totally viable. So I've been having a lot of fun working on these characters. It definitely takes a lot of time. I'm hoping the Blizzard implements something with the essence system for patch 8.2.5 maybe. Hopefully we'll hear something about that on the horizon. But anyway guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you guys were to make a 5 favorite alts that you play right now in BFA, what classes would you put on your list? And if you guys were looking forward to playing a new class, maybe learning something new for the patch 8.2, if you have any time leveling alts or just want to drop your main for a second, try something fresh to clear your head, I recommend all these classes in today's video. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.